getting back to processing. Now we have the client, what we're talking about, what we discuss during first or second, rather second, when we got paid first retainer, we working with them, and this is what we're looking for. Travel information, we have to establish that. We have to establish that they have proper travel documents and passports. Trust me, some people travel, but their family members not. So that's not that unusual to see. So you have to make sure it's in place. Source of funds. Well, that's a separate page here in presentation, but I have to mention it's on the list. Police clearance certificates. Well, we're not talking about those individuals on Interpol wanted list or API wanted list, but we're talking about clean police certificates with clean criminal records. Some people, well, let's put it this way, they're not criminals, but they have some issues. So you have to make sure they are in place, and we can proceed with something and avoid surprises later. Marriage certificate, divorce certificates. Sometimes people say, yeah, well, we not living together anymore. Well, but are you divorced? No, well, we don't have divorce in our country. That's happened too. You have to be very, very vigilant about all that. So speaking of life and death situations, death certificates for former spouses. If death took you apart, well, then you have to provide a proof of that. National IDs. Many countries have this national ID cards. You have to be very, very careful in assessing. And if you're not familiar, ask if they have national IDs, because they have to be provided, because immigration knows what they have, and you have to be one step ahead, or maybe 5 steps like we do. So family household registry books, if applicable, different countries have different rules. Most of the time it's there. You have to be very careful on providing that, because again, it's on the list. Declaration of common law union. It sounds very easy, but it's not, because in many countries, in many jurisdictions, there is none. Okay, many countries do not recognize common law union as civil marriage or civil union. You have to be very, very careful how to prepare this document if they insist on having partner, because you can't bring one person along and then break the family. And some families, they just cannot get married. So you have to work along the line and see what's possible. Canadian tax residency. This is an issue for many high net worth individuals, and I always and here as well. I ask those people to seek proper advice from actual tax advisor, not our tax lawyer, not just us, because we provide immigration advice, but we obviously cannot legally provide full-scale tax advisory. But we can guide them to the right direction, and at least raise an issue of importance of an impact that local taxation can make on their net worth. One of the most commonly used plan techniques for immigrants to Canada with significant net worth is the formation of an immigration trust. Usually it's done in a tax haven jurisdiction. It's expensive. I personally don't recommend it to anybody who is expecting or whose net worth is less than $3 million, because formation and maintenance cost about $60,000 to $70,000 to $80,000 to form it and run it. So you have to value if it's suitable for them. You cannot offer something they can afford or they don't need, because eventually they will realize you sold them something, and they will get upset, and you don't want to get rich people upset about your services. So that's different. Okay, so if properly structured, this will allow investment income earned during first 60 months, which is 5 years of Canadian residence, to be exempt from Canadian taxation. CRA is aware of that. I mean, you inform CRA. I mean, not you, but clients inform CRA. It's not like you're hiding something. That's properly set structure, but it has to be very properly set in order to work that way. And individuals who have been residents in Canada for less than 5 years are exempt from departure tax. That is something interesting, and you have to see the current status of this statement, because Again, we're not providing any kind of tax advice here, but if you read between lines, you can see how individuals can go with tax residency and immigration residency. Because they're not equal, you have to be very supportive in them searching for the right option. Local office. Well, people coming from different countries, and immigration has specific forms for different regions based on security risk and background data. And that may break the deal. Okay, so why it's important? Because when you approach people from certain regions with standard checklist and not paying attention, and later on immigration ask for that information, you at risk of being between the rock and a hard place, because on one side immigration will demand those documents and you're supposed to demand it at the beginning of the process, not at the end or when you have limited time to provide it. And clients will be upset because they expect you to provide at least right away, not at the last moment. It's hard for them sometimes to collect this information, so you better start from country-specific checklist. And obviously everything, all rule applies. Translation must be done in English or French. And language requirements for Canadian program, which we're talking about here, is a Quebec program. There is none. So you can move in without saying a word in English or French. Source of funds. Well, this is something we have to pay attention to, because people ask us about shady assets. Sometimes you have to be very firm that you have to prove funds. That's true. That's fundamental part of it, of the process. Cash deposits anywhere in the world, yes, check, it works. Property market value assessment, it's not just what people say, that's what people show. Okay, so they must be able to show the proper assessment done by licensed appraisal or licensed real estate office. And that's why, for example, our experience, if you don't have our experience, just hire some appraisal to go through this and assess value, make it reasonably assessed. At least the market value can be ballooned to enormous amount to improve net worth, because at some point government can be very suspicious in terms of implementation of certain standards and price levels. Documents that show proof of equity or capital ownership, such as stocks, bonds, debentures, treasury bills, documents that guarantee payment of a set amount of money which payable to the applicant in a later day, banker's drafts or money orders, cashier's checks, travel checks. So those things are very, very significant in terms of the program, because that's the basic material fact. So our Quebec program, which is the only investors program for what we call passive investors or high net worth individuals, which is equivalent of citizenship for investment. Basically, people invest, they get citizenship. That's what it is. No, you don't have to prove anything else. They don't have to prove building a business like provincial nominee program, or they don't have to have any talents like self-employed program, or they don't have to put any local economic development efforts in terms of, again, certain programs within P&B programs. They just have to prove they have money and they have management experience. So those things are interesting about Quebec. Last year, the net worth requirement increased from $1.6 to $2 million. Canadian we're talking about. The amount to be invested for 5 years increased from 800,000 to 1.2 million, hefty increase of 50%. It's not like Quebec got greedy. Some people asking me, why is that? Why the amount is so high? Well, my answer is, well, they have to make it competitive, because many other programs, like you saw earlier in the screen, we in London, in Australia, around the world, they're very competitive at 1.5 and 1.6 million dollar, or rather local currencies, which is much higher than Canadian. And EB5 is not direct comparison because it's always extending. The latest extent is until September of this year, so people kind of ready to go with EB5 plus the amount of fraud associated with EB5. Like we work with the center, one of the 95 centers now, and it's probably one of 5 or 6 centers that has impeccable reputation, but most of the centers tainted by investigations and frauds. So we definitely have priority of government-run immigration program, and we're not banana republic of some sort in Caribbean, not disrespect to those countries, but you have to be realistic when people talking about banana republic and people talking about Canada. It's like, for example, if we finance the process and it's opted by 99% of our applicants at 400,000 threshold, that's all in, like all the interest for the loan, legal fees, government fees, all along. Let's say round up for 400,000 instead of self-finance 1.2 million and legal fees on top of that. We compete at 400,000. We compete with countries like St. Kitts and Nevis. We compete with some banana republics in Caribbean. We compete with certain jurisdictions. We're way below, for example, Portugal, where you have to invest 1 million euros in property and run it and put together a sophisticated scheme of investment. So we're very competitive here, and people not aware of that. If people come into us, I always say, listen, if we compare the price of the program, if we compare the cost of citizenship, the Canadian passport comes at the cost of about 400,000 Canadian, which is what, exactly 300,000 US right now. For 300,000 US, what can you buy on the market? Okay, so that's the right question to ask, because people sometimes saying, oh, no, it's too expensive. Well, it's not expensive, it's just you who cannot afford it. Okay, so if you're not talking about affordability, if you're talking about a real comparison of price of citizenship for investment, 400,000, it's very compatible, it's very affordable, and then you can start from there. So all other mandatory documentation in order to prove the immigrant investor status, assets, source of funds, I'm just kind of wrapping up. The management experience remained the same, making the QUIP program one of the most administratively demanded, that's true, yet one of the most sought after immigration programs in the world. Okay, legal basis for business relocation. We have to know what regulates foreign investment. We have Investment Canada Act, which is federal legislation, federal, not provincial, that applies to every acquisition of control of a Canadian business as well as investment to establish a new Canadian business. We're talking about a variety of investors here. High net worth individuals, when they move, very rarely, in fact, they come in as passive because that's what they have. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to prove anything except their background, their experience, their wealth, their assets, but not in order to do business here, to prove something like on the provincial nominee program stream. We're talking about those people who move in here because those questions they will ask, how my investment activity in Canada will be regulated. So you have to know something about the Investment Canada Act. You have to understand those things, or you have to hire some professionals who can explain it to your clients. Don't be afraid, because that's how you show your professionalism. We in the office have pretty much links to all required professionals. Yes, we have certain licenses within the office, but for certain tax advisory, we hire somebody from outside. For forensic accounting, we hire somebody outside. Ownership of real property in Canada, well, that is governed primarily by provincial territorial law, although there is some federal law, such as goods and services tax, right? GST is a federal, income tax, environmental protection legislation, foreign investment, that will apply. So the laws, and I hope you know that, 9 common law provinces and territories are substantially similar in the dealing with real estate property, but Quebec, which operates under the civil law system, is an exception. Well, many differences exist with respect to real property in Quebec, but it's unlikely to be a major concern, what we found in our own practice. Strategic process overview. Well, you have to put together this strategy because clients want to see the light at the end of the tunnel. If they come into this tunnel called immigration process without clear strategy, they can be scared. They can turn away. They can turn to somebody who can provide this light. Be afraid of, be careful about or aware of those consultants or lawyers who greedy and unfortunately show the light without showing the process. So people get hypnotized by going to that light, like that butterfly flying too close to the lamp and burning itself, because basically sometimes that's what people do. People sell the end result without putting too much effort into the process, and that's dangerous because people can lose significant amount of money on the way if it's not properly structured. So you have to show the way, you have to show the goal, but you have to show this real structure and strategy in this process. So we assess business background, capital formation process, how it was done, what exactly happened there, and source of investment funds, family compositions, and family values must be considered. Otherwise, you can offer something that will offend people instead of encouraging them. So that's very, it can be very, very dangerous territory, because you can put people against you instead of putting people on your team. Because if you work in Islamic world, you have to be careful. If you work in certain territories of countries with certain traditions, like I recently came, well, let me give you an example. I hope Peggy will allow that sentiment. I just went to the country where I thought, due to temperature, and it's not Dubai, believe it or not, surprisingly. I went to the country where I thought I will bring shorts because it's bloody hot. It's like in Celsius, it's like 35 degrees. And the first evening, I intended to wear shorts, and my agent there, my host, he said, Alex, don't you feel like too old for that? I said, well, in Canada, we wear shorts. And then I realized, no, it's not masculine enough. It's not like male type clothes. You know, you have to be very, very careful what you wear, especially on a business meeting. I got my nice golf short, no wrinkles, all bright and nice color and very clean, trust me. And they said, oh, this is too informal. Excuse me, I said, do I have to wear it? And they took me to the store, and I got very nice French jacket and couple Italian shorts, dress shorts, and I was okay. See, those things, actually, you have to readjust right there on the spot. Otherwise, you will be an outsider. Talking to locals like you outsider, you don't have to if you want to keep the business going. So, in family composition, you have to respect what's going on in the family, because in family for them can be different as family for you or for immigration of Canada. So that's different. Lifestyle selection. I never sell anything to people which they cannot afford or they cannot maintain.